Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head back to England, and I'm not sure exactly how to describe this particular beer first off. So this one is kind of a beer brand that's contract brewed at different breweries, but they always seem to throw up some very interesting stuff. So for this one we're going to have a look at another beer from the Thomas Hardy's Ale range, and this one in particular is the historical 2018 vintage. It comes in at 13.7%. It's an English style barley wine once again, and this one is aged in Scotch whisky barrels. To be precise, it is Chivas Regal whisky barrels that they've aged this one in. So it should be a very interesting beer. This was yet another of the small partiers that we got through Systembolaget, I believe, back in early March. I think it might have been the 5th of March actually that this one came out, but very much looking forward to trying this one. I enjoyed the original Thomas Hardy's Ale, the golden anniversary one that I reviewed for you a couple of months back, if I'm remembering correctly, and I'm very curious to see how the whisky barrel aged version comes out. I think the 2017 vintage of this beer, the historical, was actually aged in Tennessee whisky barrels, so really curious, as I say, to see how this particular version turns out. So anyway, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery, in this case the history of the brand of Thomas Hardy's Ale if you like, but as always, if you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from the Thomas Hardy's Ale range before. Hopefully I can add some more in the near future. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the English beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about the Thomas Hardy's Ale then. So the Thomas Hardy's Ale was first produced back in 1968 by the Eldridge Pope Brewery from Dorchester in Dorset in England. So the brewery traces its origins back to 1837 when the hotelier Charles Eldridge and his wife Sarah bought the Green Dragon Brewery, and this brewery was later passed into the hands of the Pope brothers, who grew it substantially, which meant they had to build a new brewery which opened in 1881 as the Eldridge Pope Brewery. So the Thomas Hardy's Ale was first produced in 1968 as a one-off to commemorate the eponymous English writer and the 40th anniversary of his death, which had been in 1928. The production of the Thomas Hardy Ale began again in 1974, and the brewery eventually stopped the production of the ale in 1999, and then in 2000 they unfortunately closed their doors completely. Between 2003 and 2008 the Thomas Hardy Ale was brewed by O'Hanlon's Brewery in Exeter. This contract ceased though due to concerns about the production costs of the ale. They didn't, it was cost them a lot more money to make the beer than it was that they were actually making from selling it, and the brewery has since been bought out and it's now trading as the Hanlon's Brewery. But the Vecchiato brothers then sought to revive the brand back in 2012, and after 3 years of research and investments they finally succeeded in purchasing the brand in 2015. The two brothers, Michele and Sadiro, are from Italy, and they run the company Interbra, who import and export a lot of different beers between Italy and various other countries, and the beer is now produced at the Meantime Brewery in Greenwich in London, which is of course part of the Asahi Group from Japan. So it's kind of cool actually, and that's one of the things I would say. There is a lot of concern about big kind of corporate companies taking over these little small brewers, if you like, which of course Meantime was one of the ones that were a big upcoming craft brewery in London, but were taken over. If it does tend to be the case, the Japanese, when it comes to the bigger companies from there actually taking over, they're very good at actually making the company and stuff more efficient, but they do tend to leave. They're big on just leaving the kind of brewing side of things alone. They very much believe in tradition that way, and we've seen the same with Pilsner Urquell from what I gather actually. So it's an interesting point that just to remember. But this Thomas Hardy's Ale, it's very well sought after. The English guys like Craig over at Kent Beer Reviews, Harry at Blue Nose, Pete the Clueless Drinker and things like that, they all tell me that these Thomas Hardy's Ales are like very difficult to get in England, but we get them over here in Sweden through the small partiers. So thank you Systembolaget for that. So yeah, that's that's all you really need to know about the Thomas Hardy Ale brand for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more, you can check out the website for it in the description below, and of course you can follow their Facebook page and Instagram and stuff like that, and that'll keep you up to date with all the latest goings on there. But basically they've got a lot of different iterations of English old ales and barley wines and stuff like this too. But yeah, let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer itself then. So we can get rid of the brewery notes now. And as I said to you at the start of this video, this one is a 13.7% English style barley wine here. It says here, the Thomas Hardy's Ale, the historical, aged for 6 months in fine Scotch whisky barrels. In the Trumpet Major, a Hardy Row of Dorchester's beer, it was the most beautiful colour that the eye of an artist in the beer could desire. Full in body, yet brisk as a volcano, piquant, yet without a twang, luminous as an autumn style, free from a streakiness of taste, but finally rather heady. So yeah, not sure exactly what to make of that. Bit of a kind of posh old English thing there. You know, Scottish people can't really speak English very well, I'll just say that. There you can see Thomas Hardy, the famous author, of course. Never read any of his books, I have to admit. For this beer says, first brewed in 1968, Thomas Hardy's Ale is a barley wine style ale that improves its taste and aroma over the years. In 2015, a small quantity of Thomas Hardy's Ale was left to rest for more than 6 months in oak barrels, just like the first vintage. This is our Thomas Hardy, the historical ale. The 2018 vintage is matured in Scotch whisky barrels, which gave it notes of caramel and brandied fruits. Product of England, 13.7%. So yeah, like I said, the specific casks that they've used for this one are Chivas Regal. I believe the last one was aged in Tennessee Tennessee whiskey cask, or Tennessee bourbon cask, however you want to do it. But yeah, just a plain kind of cover on this one. But yeah, without further ado, let's get this guy out and we will get on with the tasting. I'm very curious to see how this turns out. This is a beer, of course, that you could age a little bit, but you know, I was just very curious to see how it turned out. Just a plain crown on this one, actually. But let's get it out and into the glass and see how we get on. As I said, this is a little 250 milliliter bottle, this one, and we're not going to get much of a head on this, I don't think, at all. But yeah, just a very small bottle. And this beer, you know, it was a little bit more expensive. I think I paid like 90 crowns or something for this. So for those of you watching in England where this beer is from, that'll be somewhere in the region of like £9 or something. So I hope it's worth it. But usually these bigger beers tend to be, and I was impressed, like I said, with the last Thomas Hardy, and when I saw that it was aged in Scotch barrels, I thought, you know, why not treat yourself a little bit. So as you can see with this beer, it's poured a really, if I hold this up to the light, it's actually very ruby, but just in the normal kind of light, it's very, it is very kind of mahogany coloured, if you like. It's almost got a little bit of a coppery edge to it as well. But yeah, I think in terms of its colour overall, it's quite a nice ruby edge to it, somewhere between having a ruby edge, a little bit mahogany, and a little bit coppery. You can see the head on this one is a sort of, if it was a little bit more kind of full, it would be a very kind of medium base sort of thing. Not too far away actually from the kind of gold that the little foil cap up there is made of. But yeah, it looks like a very nice beer, and you really get some of these big, boozy, fruity notes out of this one. These English barley wines are always interesting because they really are quite different. The brown sugar quality you get out of these is always very different from what you get from the American ones. So yeah, so you can see 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass on this one, but a few little ones just heading up towards the bottom of where that head would be. You can see this beer is leaving a little bit of lacing around the glass, which is to be expected when you're talking about a big boozy beer such as this one. So yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma with this and just see how we get on then. Oh, now that one is an absolute monster of a beer. I'll say straight away with this, this particular beer has it's got a lovely big brown sugary note, and you can tell that it's a very caramelised beer. This one I think has been subject to quite a long boil. You know, I know from my own experiments with home brewing that you can get these beers to be really dark and syrupy and things like that if you put the beer on for a longer boil. Most boils tend to be an hour and 10 minutes, but if you take them up to the 90-minute mark, and you can take them further of course in the boil, you really start to get these big brown sugar notes out. And it is all about the type of malt and the type of yeast and things that you use in there as well, but a huge, almost like cough syrupy brown sugar quality coming out of this one. There's treacle, molasses in there, however you want to call it. You've got some sweeter caramel notes, and you can smell the really woody oaky notes in there as well. It's quite, and from what I remember, Chivas Regal is quite it's more of a kind of a sweeter whiskey from what I remember. It's not peaty or anything like that, but you can get these lovely big oaky and vanilla notes coming out of this one. And I've always found, you know, with this other one, I think the Tennessee whiskey cask, the bourbon cask, would have been quite interesting with this as well, because the American whiskies are a little bit more sugary and more leaning towards that brown sugar end of the spectrum in comparison with the Scotch whiskies, which tend to be a little bit more. You do get sweet ones in fairness, but they do tend to be a little bit darker, if you like. But this is a lovely smelling beer. There is an element of breadiness to this one. You can pick up a little touch of a brown bready quality in here. Some biscuity notes, almost like a little bit like a McVitie's digestive, but it really is the big brown sugars that are coming out of it. Very highly caramelised, treacle, molasses sort of thing. A long boil beer, this, without doubt, I think. A little bit of biscuity sweetness. You can pick up a little touch of earthiness from the hops, and you can also get that just lovely big boozy quality. There's a nice woodiness to this one as well, definitely oaky and a slight little hint of vanilla also. I can see why they say brandy with this too, because it really has that edge to it. The fruity side of this beer is also very interesting. It's got a little bit of a figgy juiciness to it, which is very interesting. You've got a little bit of a raisiny sharpness as well, maybe kind of some sultanas in there as well. There's a good bit of complexity to the fruit in here for me. Some plums also, I think, and maybe even a little bit of a kind of blackberry or something like that. There's a hell of a lot of candied fruit aroma coming out of this one. It's very like a medicinal aroma that you get out of this beer. It really is interesting. If you compare these old English style barley wines to the American ones, they're definitely just darker in their brown sugar qualities overall. The American ones tend to be a little bit sweeter and more leaning towards the kind of sweet side of the spectrum, but this one to me is kind of roasted. It's not well fired, if you like, but definitely a big kind of long boil, syrupy, molasses kind of brown sugar out of this beer. As I always say, take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of the beers before you get stuck into them. And this one, the real thing the thing that's really sticking out for me on this beer is just how complex the fruity side of it is. This is just a lovely take on the English barley wine style, and I'll keep an eye out for these Thomas Hardy's ales. It's something that is quite difficult to come across, but as I say, we're quite lucky in Sweden by all accounts. So yeah, just take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of this one before you get stuck into it. It really does smell quite lovely, actually. Yeah, and you can smell the booze in it straight away. So yeah, without further ado then, let's just have a taste of this beer. I'm really curious to see how this one turns out. So this one is the historical 2018 vintage, aged in Chivas Regal Scotch barrels for 6 months, from the Thomas Hardy ale brand, brewed at the Meantime Brewery in Greenwich in London in England. Let's get stuck into this beer. An English barley wine coming in at 13.7%, although I suspect it could just be a little bit more than that. Let's get stuck in. Sláinte, skål. Oh yeah, that's really quite nice actually. This beer is one that goes from being very sweet in the beginning, and the middle of your palate really dries out with this actually. That's very interesting how that all goes together. I don't think I've ever come across a beer that has such a dramatic kind of transition on the palate. That's really unusual. Let's take a few more sips of it and just see if that continues. Yeah, that really is quite unusual actually. Yeah, I always like, and this is one of the other things with whiskey, of course, you really can taste the differences in this. Being a native Scot, if you like, you really notice the difference for your whiskies. I always remember Chivas Regal leaning towards the brown sugary side of things. I don't remember it being quite as dry as this, but you really get these big whiskey flavours mixing in. to that malt base there. That's a beautiful, beautiful beer. Thumbs up to the guys at Meantime for pulling this one off. It really is very, very well done. Where to start with this one then? So you can feel a nice little bit of that brown bready quality. That just blankets the middle of your palate. But the whiskey, one of the things I've always found about Scotch whiskey barrel aging is it does lighten up the malt base. And the beer that I particularly learned that with was the Cuvée Vin de Keyser, pardon me, from Galden Carolus. It really showed me, because they do their own whiskies as well, and they were aging it in some of the whiskey barrels. It really does lighten up the mouthfeel actually, particularly in the middle of the palate. So it's really interesting. You get all this flavour, but it's just, you get a very this light but still wet quality in the middle of your palate, and you really pick that up in this beer as well. I always found it's a bit more pronounced actually if you're using Scotch whisky casks rather than ones from other countries, and I'm not sure exactly why that is, but you really pick up that in this particular beer. So for me, this one has that nice kind of brown bready base to it. You've got the woody elements just almost infused into that. The oaky notes are there. There's almost a little touch of spice to the oak, but that's quite minimal, I would say. As you come further forward in that kind of bready part of the beer, you can feel a little touch of an almost nutty quality in there, and there's vanilla kind of surrounding it as well. If you go more towards the front of the palate, it's really interesting just how that whole kind of thing goes together. But the wood and the nutty flavours are very much infused into that quite light bready base that the beer has. It's very, very light, that, so just be aware that it might be difficult for you to detect on your first few sips, I would say. Yeah, but I tell you something, this is a really, really nice beer, this one. I like how everything goes together in it. And as I said, the middle of your palate really does dry out quite nicely. The brown sugars are sitting on top of this, and they start to come out more and more the further that you go into the flavour. It does have a well-fired edge to it, this beer, which is quite interesting. So on top of that, you've got these treacle molasses flavours, and it's almost like burnt brown sugars actually, which is kind of interesting. The beer, and as I say, if you go to the very back corners of your palate, then just push your way in from the side a little bit, you really feel this really dark burnt sugar dryness to the beer. As you come further forward from that, it sweetens up a little bit and becomes a more oily, darker treacle molasses, but in the very centre of your tongue you've got more of the lighter, sweeter caramel in there, and there's a nice biscuity, very slight McVitie's Digestive kind of flavour to this beer as well. But you can tell that the whisky flavour is infused throughout the whole thing. You can really, really feel that with this beer, which is interesting. I think I did actually say, I'm not sure, would I prefer this one to the original Thomas Hardy's Ale, the 50th anniversary edition? I'm really not sure actually. The whiskey, Scotch whisky barrel aging is something that I'm still being convinced with it a little bit. It does definitely lighten up the beers and smooth out the mouthfeel a little bit, but you know, there's a very, very good base beer to this one. I'm not sure I'm wholly convinced it makes it better. It does make it different, but maybe my personal preference is just to have the kind of original beer, and it's a personal opinion. Other people might think differently, but you can really see how barrel aging can make these beers very, very complex. And you know, we were always quite well versed with barrel aging because of Innocent Gun. Back in Scotland, Innocent Gun were some of the first sort of craft beers that we were drinking, but it really, really smooths out the beer, and it's interesting how it affects the mouthfeel as well. But you know, overall, the way that the malt base comes together in this beer is very, very nice. On the hoppy side of things, there's not too much to report in this beer. You've just got a little touch of earthiness in the back corners of your palate that spreads out a little bit and just goes towards the very, very front corners of your tongue. You can pick out that there's a teensy little bit of floral quality, and then it's lighter and grassy around the very kind of front curve of the tongue too. But yeah, the fruity side of this beer is particularly interesting. I can see on the back why they say brandied fruits. It really does have the big alcoholic kind of quality to it. You can really feel some of the warmth down here in the chest from this beer, which is interesting, but not surprising actually. So behind that front curve of the palate then, you get these big, dark red fruity notes in there. It's definitely plums, there's raisins. It's definitely not as sweet and juicy, if you like, as you might have picked up in the aroma. It's almost got a cakey edge to it, this beer, but it's a lot lighter and less oily than I remember the original Thomas Hardy being. The original Thomas Hardy was a big oily beast of a beer, and this is what I was saying. I think the Scotch barrel aging just to me it lightens up the mouthfeel, it smooths it out, but it doesn't take away the oiliness. And I think when it comes to a barley wine, I personally very much like the oiliness. As we always say with beer though, it is very much subjective. You guys might like the barrel aging things a lot more than I do. And like I said, it certainly does make the beer different. To me, I don't know if I'm convinced that it makes it better, because I've had a couple of beers where I've thought this, I like the original a little bit better than the barrel aged version. So yeah, adds a different layer of complexity to it, but I don't know if you really need to do it. I really don't know about that. It's an interesting thing to talk about, but we don't want to spend too much time kind of focusing on that. But on the fruity side of the things, like I say, you've got a nice kind of dark, plummy, raisiny quality to this one. There is a little bit of that candied, red fruity edge to the beer. You've got a nice figgy raisin note to this one as well, which is very, very nice. Yeah, I like that. You almost get a little touch of a blackberry note coming out of this one, or I don't know if it's blackcurrant or blackberry, but there's definitely a little bit of one of those coming out the further you go into the aftertaste, and you can feel on the tip of the end of your tongue there just some of the alcoholic warmth coming out of this one, which is very, very interesting. I like how all these flavours go together, and like I was saying, if we talk about the mouthfeel a little bit now, the thing that really strikes me about this beer is just how much the palate dries out when you drink this. I've never quite had a beer that has that same mouthfeel to it. When you take this one in, it is very wet, it does feel quite boozy, but it really does dry out you at the middle of your palate. So pay attention to that when you try this one for yourself. So overall, it's a full-bodied beer, this one, but not the fullest body beer that I've come across. It's not as full-bodied, I think, as the original one. Carbonation is very, very smooth on this. The mouthfeel overall, it has a little bit of wetness to it, and it's quite slick actually. I think it's fair to describe this one as being quite slick. It does slide over the tongue very, very easily. It's nowhere near as thick and almost chewy, if you like, as the original Thomas Hardy. Not much in the way of hoppy bitterness to this one. I think you'd be lucky to get about 30, 40 IBUs out of this. There is a little bit of dryness from the hops in the back corners of the palate, and also some on the front sides of the tongue. I think you're looking somewhere in the region of about 30 IBUs to this beer. Good bit of juicy fruitiness. It is a very dark alcoholic fruitiness that's coming out of this beer. There's almost a cakey edge to the beer as well, and the malt base is very well balanced between being very, very smooth and having that darker brown sugar sweetness. To me, if I compare this to the original Thomas Hardy, it's nowhere near as sweet and chewy and oily as I mentioned, and the mouthfeel is certainly a good little bit thinner, and I have found that with a couple of beers. As I mentioned before, the one that is springing to mind at the moment was the Whiskey Barrel Aged Cuvée Van de Keyser from Galden Carolus. Of course, that's another one that's kind of struck me like this. So as I say, it's an interesting observation for me. I think I prefer the original Thomas Hardy rather than the kind of whiskey barrel aged version. A lot of people pay a lot of money for the barrel aging versions, but as I say, I'm not 100% convinced it makes it a better beer. It does make it very, very interesting, and there's nothing wrong with this beer, do not get me wrong in that sense, but personally I think I just prefer I do prefer the original one to this. But as we always say, beer is subjective. Different people will have different opinions. I would be interested to hear what you guys think about whiskey barrel aging and stuff like this in the comment section below as well. But again, it's another very, very nice beer. I wouldn't hesitate to drink this one again, but if I had the choice between the two, like I say, I'd probably pick the original one over this. This one's just a lot lighter and less kind of chewy. If I want an English barley wine, I do want it to be a big kind of oily, chewy sort of thing. The American ones I would expect to be a little bit more kind of juicy and fruity. So I'm not sure the whiskey barrel aging works all that well with the barley wines. I think it works lovely with imperial stouts and old ales and Scotch ales and stuff like that, but I'm not overly convinced when it comes to the English barley wine. But yeah, it's interesting this, and it's another kind of first, I guess you could say, for the channel. But they've produced another very, very interesting beer, and it's been a pleasure to review it for you guys here on the channel. So I hope you've enjoyed my take on this one, even though I haven't enjoyed this one quite as much as the original Thomas Hardy's ale. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this. This one is the historical 2018 vintage, aged for 6 months in Chivas Regal whiskey barrels. A really, really interesting beer, this one. For me though, not quite up to the same, just not quite on the same level, if you like, as the original Thomas Hardy's, but that's a personal preference. As we always say, beer is very much subjective. But thank you again for watching my beer reviews. As always, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from the Thomas Hardy's ale range as well, and I'm sure I'll review more from these guys over the coming years, months and whatever. But thank you again for watching, and I will catch you guys very soon. Make sure you check out my social media, and if you can get a hold of one of these Thomas Hardy ales, I really recommend that you have a go at it. The historical 2018 edition, aged in Chivas Regal barrels for 6 months, from Thomas Hardy's ale, based at Meantime Brewery in Greenwich in London, England. Until the next time, Slàinte just now, and I'll catch you guys later. Slàinte, skål.